In 1995, Japan's economy was worth $5.6 trillion. Today, it's worth $4.2 trillion. Japan is the only major economy on Earth that is smaller in dollar terms than it was 30 years ago. And yet, unemployment, 2.5%. Life expectancy, the longest of any major economy. And for 34 straight years, it was the single largest creditor nation on the planet. Japan has been collapsing for 3 decades, and Japan is one of the richest places that has ever existed. Both of those are true at the same time. By the end of this video, you'll know the one number that decides which of those stories wins. And here's the uncomfortable part. Your country is probably running the same experiment right now. This is the machinery behind the paradox. So how does the most feared economy on Earth just stop? To understand the fall, you need the rise. Between 1980 and 1995, Japan's economy quadrupled in dollar terms, from 1.1 trillion to 5.6. By the late 80s, it wasn't a question of whether Japan would overtake America. It was a question of when. Japanese firms bought Rockefeller Center and Columbia Pictures. Management books told American executives to copy Japanese factories. Japan was, by nearly every measure, the future. Then came the most expensive square kilometers in human history. By 1989, Tokyo real estate had inflated so far that the land under the Imperial Palace was famously estimated to be worth more than all the real estate in California. The Nikkei stock index hit 38,915 points in December 1989. It would not see that number again for 34 years, until February 2024. When the bubble burst, it didn't pop like a crash. It deflated like a slow leak for an entire generation. And here's where the story turns. What followed has a boring name and terrifying mechanics: deflation. From 1995 to 2012, Japan's average inflation rate was negative. Not low, negative. Prices, on average, fell for 17 years. Why is that poison? Think about it. If money buys more next year than this year, you delay spending. Companies see falling revenue, so they freeze wages. Frozen wages mean less spending. Less spending means falling prices. It's a loop, and once an economy falls in, almost nothing pulls it out. But a shrinking economy was only half the illusion. The other half was the money itself. Now, about that shrinking economy, some of it is real stagnation. But a huge part of the recent collapse is something else: the yen itself. In 2012, $1 bought about 80 yen. By 2024, it bought about 150. Japan's economy, measured in yen, actually grew. Measured in dollars, it shrank by 1/3 since 2012. Same country, same factories, same output. The measuring stick changed. That distinction matters because it splits Japan's story into 2 different problems: slow growth, which is chronic, and a weak currency, which is a policy choice. Here's the moment that stings in Tokyo. Adjusted for what money actually buys, the average South Korean now out-earns the average Japanese. In 2024, GDP per person at purchasing power parity. Korea, $55,000. Japan, $46,000. Germany, $62,000. America, $75,000. In 1990, Japan was comfortably ahead of Korea. 3 lost decades later, the student has passed the teacher, and the gap is still widening. So that should be the end of the story. Japan lost. Except the same official spreadsheets say something that makes no sense. So that's the collapse story. Shrinking dollar GDP, deflation, overtaken by neighbors. Now here's the other story, told with the same official numbers. Japan's unemployment rate in 2024, 2.5%. France, above 7%. Even America, at full employment, sits higher. Japan went through 30 years of stagnation without mass unemployment, without a banking collapse, without austerity riots. Name another economy that stagnated for a generation and kept virtually everyone employed. There isn't one. And then there's the machine nobody talks about. While its domestic economy stagnated, Japan quietly became the world's landlord. Decades of trade surpluses were invested abroad. Factories in Ohio, bonds in Europe, ports in Asia. For 34 consecutive years, Japan held more foreign assets, net, than any other country on Earth, over $3 trillion worth, until Germany finally edged it out in the 2024 figures. In 2024 alone, Japan earned $193 billion more from the world than it paid out. Japan doesn't just work for its money anymore. Like a wealthy retiree, it lives partly off its investments. Which brings us to the number that should have destroyed Japan already. Government debt, 214% of GDP. That is double the United States, triple Germany, and the highest of any major economy in recorded history. Economists have predicted a Japanese debt crisis every year since the 90s. It keeps not happening. 3 reasons. The debt is in yen, a currency Japan prints. Nearly half of it is owned by Japan's own central bank, which returns the interest back to the government. And most of the rest is held by Japanese institutions, not foreign creditors who might flee. It is, in effect, money the country owes to itself. That doesn't make it free. It makes it stable, right up until the day inflation forces interest rates up. That's the one lever that turns Japan's quiet debt into a loud problem. And it's why the whole world watches every Bank of Japan meeting. So how can both stories be true? Because GDP measures the flow of new income and almost nothing about the stock of existing wealth. Japan's flow is weak. Its stock is enormous. 3 decades of accumulated foreign assets, world-class infrastructure, and the longest-lived, safest society among major economies. Life expectancy, 84 years. Think of 2 families. One earns more every single year, but owns nothing. The other's income has flatlined, but it owns its house, has no consumer debt, and holds a fat investment portfolio. GDP says family 1 is winning. Walk into both homes and you might disagree. Japan didn't collapse. It traded growth for stability, partly by choice, partly by demographic destiny, and it ran that trade longer than any economy in modern history. The result is a country that looks poor in the spreadsheets and rich on the street. The real question isn't why Japan is still rich. It's whether Japan is the warning or the preview. Because shrinking populations, massive public debt, and central banks holding half of it, that's not a Japanese story anymore. That's Europe in 10 years. Maybe America in 20. Japan just got there first. Every number you just saw is public. IMF and World Bank, sources in the description, so you can check the machinery yourself. If you want to see how countries, companies, and property markets actually make and lose money, charted from the raw data, subscribe. Next time, the countries that did collapse and the one chart that predicted every single one of them.